I don't want to exaggerate, but there are moments when I regret not taking seriously those warnings that pop up everywhere. Since I was a kid, I was always the kind who played with fire, crossed the street without looking, and climbed rooftops just for the thrill of danger. It was like something in my head didn't fully register the consequences, but it's one thing to be an idiot with everyday things, and another to get into places where not even common sense can protect you. I'm not proud of this, but I've always had a tendency to do things without thinking, especially when it comes to the internet. Who hasn't done it, right? I guess curiosity can lead us down very dark paths. I remember I started exploring the deep web a few years ago just for fun and boredom. I did it for no particular reason, just because I could. I had heard so many stories and read about what one could find there that I thought none of it could affect me. To me, it was a simple pastime. I liked seeing how far I could go and what weird things I could find, always with the mindset that it was all fake or exaggerated. I would go in and out of strange forums, pages full of ads for illegal things, ridiculous conspiracies, and files full of data I never dared to open. It was like walking through a museum of the bizarre and forbidden. I did all this from the safety of my room, thinking that as long as I was in front of a screen, nothing could harm me. Everything changed when I stumbled upon the opportunity to buy a mystery box. What at first seemed like a harmless joke, something else to laugh at, quickly turned into an experience I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I had heard about these boxes, packages filled with random items sent by strangers, full of things no one should have in their home. Sometimes they were just junk. Other times they were items that seemed to have some sentimental or macabre value. People had received disturbing things, from old toys to personal items that looked like they had been taken from abandoned houses or crime scenes. For me, it was just another game, one of those experiences you want to try just so you can tell the story later at a gathering with friends, between laughs and silly anecdotes. I decided to do it one Friday night. The truth is, I wasn't in the best place. I was alone, bored, and had a few beers. It was an impulsive decision, one of those you make without thinking much, like when you buy something at a store just because it's on sale. I found a forum on the deep web where there were sellers offering these boxes, with descriptions that seemed pulled from a bad horror movie. Without thinking too much, I chose one that promised an unforgettable experience. The seller didn't give many details, just a brief description full of vague and sinister promises. The price was ridiculous, low enough to seem like a scam. But even so, instead of opting for something safe, I let myself be carried away by morbid curiosity. I paid in Bitcoin and without thinking twice, I gave my address. I have never been a careful person, and that night, less than ever. The purchasing process was so simple and eerie that it felt like a joke. They didn't ask for confirmation, didn't send a follow-up email. Nothing. Just a black screen and a simple message. Thank you for your purchase. In my head, I laughed at the idea that if something weird showed up, I'd just throw it in the trash and laugh it off. I thought it was just another silly internet whim, one of those stories told on Reddit, but that never really happened to anyone. A couple of weeks passed, and honestly, I had already forgotten about the purchase. I didn't receive any confirmation, no strange emails, nothing to indicate that the box was on its way. At that moment, I thought it had been just another scam, something that simply remained in the air. Everything was normal until one night I heard a loud knock on my door. It wasn't a doorbell. Not those polite knocks a mailman makes. It was a sharp thud like someone had thrown something heavy against the wood. My first reaction was to jump up from the couch with that mix of confusion and adrenaline that floods you when something surprises you. I looked at the clock and saw that it was almost 12 at night. Everything was silent. I went to the door, looked out the window and saw no one. I stood there for a few seconds staring at the empty street and the darkened lights of the neighboring houses. It seemed like there wasn't a soul for miles around. Something in my gut told me not to open the door, but my curiosity was stronger. When I opened it, I saw a package on the ground, wrapped in dirty brown paper, as if it had passed through 1,000 hands before reaching mine. There were stains that looked like splatters of something dark and dry. There was no label, no sender, nothing that would give me a clue as to who had left it there. The first thing I thought was, here it is. It wasn't excitement that I felt, it was something closer to panic. I bent down, picked up the package, and brought it inside. I left it on the table and stared at it for a while, trying to decide if I really wanted to open it. There was something about that box that made me feel uncomfortable. as if I knew that what I was about to discover wasn't going to be anything good. I turned around a few times, took a glass of water, and tried to calm myself, but the box was still there like a damn thorn stuck in my mind. Finally, I grabbed a kitchen knife and cut the brown paper with trembling hands. The first thing that hit me was the smell. A mixture of dampness, metal, and something else, something I couldn't identify, but that instantly turned my stomach. It was a stench that stuck in my nose and made me gag, a reek that seemed to come from a sewer or an abandoned basement. I opened the box carefully, and what I saw left me frozen. Inside were a series of rusty knives, clearly used, with dark stains that I had no trouble identifying as dried blood. The knives were thrown in carelessly, some wrapped in old rags and others just loose. I didn't dare touch them too much, but I could see they were old knives, some kitchen and others hunting. All in a deplorable state, as if they had been used for things I preferred not to imagine. Fear began to creep in slowly, and I started regretting my stupid idea. I wanted to close the box and forget everything, but something in me, a sick mix of terror and curiosity, forced me to keep looking. As I pulled more objects out of the box, everything became more twisted. There was a small bag full of human teeth, teeth of different sizes and colors, some with bits of gum still attached. I touched them with the tips of my fingers, unwilling to believe they were real, but deep down I knew. Then I found another bag full of clumps of hair, nails, and what seemed to be dried pieces of skin. Every item I pulled out looked like it had come from a crime scene. There was something deeply disturbing about the way everything was arranged, as if someone had collected those pieces of horror with a precise and sinister intention. I found small bags filled with a thick, dark liquid, sealed with tape and packed to the brim. The texture and color were repugnant, a tone that reminded me of congealed blood. My instinct told me not to touch them, but my mind was far from any sense. I moved them a bit, feeling the contents slide inside, heavy and disgusting. Everything in that box reeked of death, decay, and something even more sinister that I couldn't name. The sense that someone had put that box together with a specific purpose, and that purpose involved me, wouldn't leave me alone. The worst blow came when at the bottom of the box I found a letter. It was a crumpled piece of paper, handwritten with a childish and careless scrawl, like it had been written by a child or someone trying to imitate one. When I opened it, I noticed the words were crooked, written with a pencil that had left smudges all over the paper. What it said froze me. Get ready, because in the next mystery box they buy, it's you. At the end of the letter, there was a hand-drawn smiley face, one of those simple and silly faces that seem harmless, but in that context felt like a direct mockery of my fear. But the most disturbing part wasn't that. Alongside the letter were a bunch of photos. They weren't just any photos. They were pictures of me. Photos taken from outside my house, through my windows, at different times of day and night. Some were so clear that I could see the details of my own expression, as if someone had been close enough to notice every movement, every gesture. There were photos of me sleeping, watching TV, cooking, even one where I was sitting in front of my computer. Probably the same day I ordered the box, I felt my heart race. Someone had been watching me without my knowing, someone who knew exactly who I was and what I was doing at every moment. I slammed the box shut, panic taking over my body. My hands trembled as I stuffed everything into a garbage bag, trying to get rid of it all, as if that could erase what I had seen. I checked every window and every door in my house, making sure everything was locked, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me even at that very moment. Every shadow, every noise felt like an imminent threat. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little sound made me jump from the couch, knife in hand, ready to face an invisible enemy. The following days were hell. I couldn't focus on anything. I kept looking over my shoulder. Every time I heard a car pass by or noticed something out of place, my mind would go back to the letter and the photos. I tried to carry on with my life, to stay calm and not tell anyone so I wouldn't seem like a paranoid lunatic, but my fear kept growing. The thought that someone had been inside my house taking pictures of me was a thought that devoured me from the inside, more than anything else I had seen in the box. I thought about calling the police, but what was I going to say? That I had bought a box on the deep web and now thought someone was following me? I had no tangible evidence of a crime, and I couldn't admit that it all started because of my own stupidity. In the end, I decided to move. I left everything behind, sold what I could, and moved far from the city, looking for a house in a rural area. as far away from the suburbs where I used to live. I changed my phone number, threw away my computer, and bought a new one, with which I only do the strictly necessary. I don't want anyone to track me. I completely changed my life, and now I live isolated, with the constant paranoia that at any moment that nightmare could continue. I never went back to the deep web, and I never will. I learned the hard way that curiosity doesn't just kill the cat, it can ruin your life in ways you never imagined. I live with the constant anxiety that, even though I left everything behind, what happened may not be over. I just hope my story serves as a warning so that others don't make the same mistake. I can't say where I am, and I'd rather no one knows. I no longer feel safe anywhere, and I always have the feeling that I'm being watched. Don't mess with what you don't understand. What started as a game ended up being a nightmare from which I still can't wake up. If you've ever thought about buying something from the deep web, especially a mystery box, think twice. It could be you who ends up in the next box. I've always had a morbid curiosity to see things we shouldn't witness or content that shouldn't even exist but does. You know, those macabre videos people send each other of people being murdered, horrible accidents, animal torture, etc. Where most people would look away in disgust, I couldn't help myself and let it draw me in, finding myself intrigued. I know I'm not proud of it, and it might sound twisted to admit it, but even I have a limit. I've always been good with technology and computers, and it was this addictive curiosity and my skills that led me to the deep web. Of course, I already knew about it and had heard of it like many of you, but I had never taken the step to explore it myself until my desire to see disturbing things became too strong, and I decided to take the time to research and download the necessary software to venture into its dark corners of content. So that's what I did. Bored of the same routine of studying, working, and playing, I decided to look for a new thrill. And because of what I said earlier about being intrigued by this twisted web, well, sometimes it's better not to let curiosity get the best of you. After installing the software, I chose to encrypt my data with T and a VPN to redirect my real location, making me feel as secure as I thought I could be. I was finally in, exploring the so-called deep web. At first, it felt strange as I navigated through numerous .onion-type links. After some exploring, I had seen some weird things ranging from disturbing pornography to illegal content, including the sale of people and stolen pets. It wasn't until I entered a chat room that things got too real. I found myself in a live chat room. There weren't many participants online, but a message appeared shortly after I entered, from a random username initiating a conversation with me. It said, "Hello." I replied with the same greeting, and I got another message asking me what I was looking for. I had my fingers on the keys, thinking of what to say when I thought, what the hell, I know why I'm here, let's be honest. So I told him what I was looking for and asked if he had any interesting links. It didn't take long before he replied saying, "Ha ha ha ha, well, if you're really sure about that, I have a link that will blow your mind, and if you don't mind, you can watch a live stream. I highly recommend it." And with that, this person sent me a link. I hesitated for a second before clicking, and it took me to a new black page containing multiple faded, encrypted, but still readable links. I went back to thank the person who sent me the link, but he was already gone. So, continuing my journey deeper down the rabbit hole, I headed further into the dark web, studying the links to choose one that caught my attention more than the others. Upon clicking, I was taken to another page where a pop-up appeared. Only enter if you're ready for what's coming, with two options, continue or go back. For some reason, I didn't hesitate and clicked continue, not fully understanding what I was getting into or what I was about to witness. Another page loaded, a blank black screen, where after a second, a digital coin began to fall across the page. It landed spinning before large text appeared above it showing heads or tails. A box of terms and conditions appeared, followed by a fee to continue. I'm not proud of this, and God, how I wish I had made a different decision now. But being in the moment and so caught up, I entered the fee and continued. Soon a video link appeared on my screen. Upon examining it, I could see it was some kind of dark basement with metal chains hanging from the ceiling and an empty chair in the center beneath them. Looking closer, I saw a timer in the top left corner counting down. At the bottom of the video, texts with usernames started appearing. It was a live chat, and without realizing it, I had stumbled into some kind of live stream. Now interested, I joined the conversation and said hello as I saw some other users doing. One replied, "A newcomer, welcome." And at that moment, a shirtless figure appeared on the screen wearing an old, battered gas mask. He just stared at the camera as his chest rose and fell, breathing heavily. The timer ended and the admin typed in the chat, welcoming everyone back and delighted to see some new faces in the show. Without wasting more time, the man in the gas mask raised his hand, calling someone into the room. From the back, another person with a gas mask entered, pushing something covered by what looked like a dusty and worn-out cloth. Placing whatever it was in the center of the room, the figure left, leaving the shirtless man standing next to the sheet as he counted down with his fingers before yanking it off in one swift motion. What I saw left me completely out of place. I don't know what I expected, but what appeared on the screen in front of me was a naked man, tied up with his head hanging down, clearly drugged or unconscious. That's when the man stepped aside while fidgeting with a coin in his hand. In the chat, an option appeared: heads or tails. Heads, wake up with your earlobes burned; tails, wake up with your nose burned. The question was directed at a user who immediately clicked on their choice without hesitation. After the selection, the man in the gas mask picked up a handheld blowtorch from the table beside him. The orange glow lit up the screen before returning to focus, and I knew what was coming next. Horrified, the man placed his hand on the victim's head and held the torch inches from his ear. Within seconds, the man in the chair reacted to the heat, waking up with a jolt of pain, shaking his head back and forth. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The man in the mask nearly burned off the ear of the unwilling participant. I felt my temperature start to rise from the anxiety and shock of what I was witnessing. The man threw the torch aside and again looked at the camera. Another question directed at a viewer appeared on the screen: heads or tails. Heads, hang from the eye sockets; tails, hang from the ankles. The chat exploded with messages of heads, tails, heads, everyone demanding what they wanted to see. I couldn't believe it, and before I knew it, the viewer had sent their choice. The screen flickered with the word heads, and to my horror, what happened next made me sick. The man in the mask grabbed the two hooks positioned above the poor victim in the chair as he lowered them to eye level. You could see the fear in the man's eyes as he struggled futilely to break free. Holding his head in place, the man in the mask waved the hook toward the camera before driving it through the man's eye socket, just above the eyeball, where you can feel the hollow, bony part of your socket. The man's screams were chilling as he writhed in agony, blood dripping down his face as the man in the mask repeated the gruesome act on the other eye socket. Both sockets pierced with hooks. The masked man stared at the camera while extending his arm, his thumb pointing downward before slowly turning it to a thumbs up. He pressed a button in his hand, and the sounds of what happened next will haunt me forever. The chains above suddenly reacted, and the man began to rise from the chair, being lifted by his eye sockets. The screams were chilling, the sound of pure agony rumbling through my speakers. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I know I said I watched disturbing things, but nothing like what I was seeing now. Something live with someone so helpless. This was too much. The man now hung in the air by his eye sockets, trembling in pain as he stared at my screen, frozen by shock. I had seen enough, but it was too late. I hadn't even noticed when the next question appeared: heads or tails. Heads, bat to the knees; tails, scissors to the Achilles tendons. Then, seeing no response on the screen, I realized the question was directed at me. My username was highlighted, just like the others who had been chosen before me. My pulse began to race. I could feel sweat running down my forehead. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't choose such a savage act or be part of this torture. Comments flooded the screen. Cut the damn bastard's ankles. To these people, this was a game. Instead of sending an option with my trembling finger, I typed, "Pass, I can't choose." There was a silence as the man in the mask stared at the screen. It felt like he was looking directly at me. The comments turned against me. "This coward is in the wrong place. Choose now, idiot." Adrenaline rushed through my body, and I typed again, "I'm not going to choose or be part of these despicable actions. You're all sick." The spectators laughed at me, and just when I was about to leave, my mouse froze. I couldn't move it to leave the screen. Nothing worked. The man in the mask kept staring at the screen while another question appeared. A question that drained the color from my skin and hit me like I'd been winded. Heads or tails? And the question stated my full name, followed by, "Will you be part of our next show?" Heads, yes. Tails, no. Comments flooded the screen. "Yes, you're next." The man in the mask approached the screen, and all I could hear was his terrifying breathing, followed by a deep, masked voice. "We'll see you soon, Esteban." My heart was racing, At that moment, I ripped the cables from the back of my computer, disconnecting it instantly. The screen went black. I sat there in the dark, silent, in shock, thinking about what had just happened, what I had just seen, and what I had gotten myself into. How did they know my name? I thought I was protected and anonymous. I didn't know if these were empty scare tactics or if they were really serious. What I do know is that they weren't the kind of people you'd want to mess with. I couldn't sleep after that. My eyes were open to the dark world that exists beyond the little bubble of reality we live in, and it's very real and far too terrifying. A week passed since that night, and all I could think about was what had happened. I felt on edge. Every person who looked at me, I felt like they were watching me. But after many sleepless nights, and as time passed, I started to believe that it was just a threat, and that what that masked man said was just to scare me away, and it worked. Well, that was until the other night when there was a loud knock on my door. I went to see who it was, but there was no one there. Just an envelope on the ground that had been slipped through my mailbox. Upon opening it, I felt physically sick. What I held in my hands was a coin, accompanied by a note that said, "Heads or tails, see you soon." I am currently living out of town at a friend's house, too scared to go back home. I don't know what to do or if my life will ever return to normal. My forays into the dark web have left me living in fear, and if anyone hears this and learns anything from my situation, please don't go looking on the deep web. It's not a place to play around. Don't let curiosity get the best of you like it did to me. It was the worst decision I ever made, and I regret it every day. I will never forget the first time I heard about the dark web and all the crazy things you could find there. My friends and I in high school were big fans of internet legends, and we spent a lot of time browsing places like Reddit and 4chan looking for weird stuff, both old and new. We weren't really looking for anything specific. We just loved the element of surprise and the unpredictability of what you might come across. I think my generation was very drawn to this kind of behavior because of things like LimeWire. I mean, we were the first wave of kids who were given electronic devices and an internet connection, and then left to our own interests. This was the first era in which a person could hear about something, and then go to the web and learn more about it. While many of us were just downloading songs and music videos, others had learned that you could pretty much download anything from LimeWire. This turned the program into a kind of strange roulette where you never knew what you might see. One minute you think you're downloading a My Chemical Romance song, and then it turns out to be a decapitation video. So as you can imagine, we were pretty fascinated with the notion of the dark web. At first it was just something we talked about, random things we had heard, rumors we made up, or horror stories we read online. It all fueled a fascination that just wouldn't go away, at least, not until we saw it. There's no other way to describe it. The dark web is the final frontier. It's the only place where a person can truly explore and possibly see something that no other human will ever see. We started learning about what it would take to make a trip there. None of us wanted to use our own devices to make the journey, so we thought about getting a disposable laptop. Of course, being high school kids, we didn't have much money to spend on that, but the urge to take the plunge was overwhelming one day, and I didn't care. It's not like going into the dark web is illegal. It all depends on what you do when you get there. I told everyone that I would figure it out with my computer at home. It took me a couple of days of research, but I figured it out. I'm not going to explain how to do it so you don't make the same mistakes I did. I'll just say it requires a special browser to access. If you really want to go, you'll have to learn the rest on your own. I made the necessary modifications, downloaded the software I needed, and then began experimenting. Getting to the dark web is actually much easier than they say. The hard part is navigating it. There aren't URLs like on the normal internet. You have to know the highly specific web addresses to find the sites. This keeps any newbie from just wandering into the dark web and taking a tour of potentially shady places. Undeterred, I went to my old friend 4chan. Anonymous users there gave me some advice, mainly telling me to stay away, but after a night of asking and exchanging, they finally gave me a link to copy and paste with a list of dark web URLs. There were thousands of them. I remember feeling dizzy when I saw them. I couldn't even imagine all the crazy things that were archived before me. So, I started the way anyone would, one link at a time. I can't even express how disappointed I felt when I pasted the first link and it took me to a dead website. I thought I'd been duped, totally scammed. The first 10 or 20 links were all the same dead sites. Still, I wasn't going to give up. I'd spent a year of my high school life talking about the wonders of this place. I couldn't just give up and say, well, I guess I was wrong, there's nothing here. I did what any sensible teenager would do. I jumped ahead in the links. I actually found one that looked the shadiest and followed it. And this time, the site wasn't dead. It was some kind of online marketplace, and as you can imagine, all the items for sale weren't things you could buy in a store. I stumbled upon a sort of fetish site where you could buy urine, and I mean any kind of urine in the world. It seemed like the site mainly dealt with clean urine, the kind that would pass a drug test. I had hit the jackpot. I spent some time scrolling just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. After all, I was an explorer and needed to make an accurate report to my friends. The rest of the night passed slowly, as it often does with methodical research. My friends were stunned when I told them. They couldn't believe I had actually found something and that I'd done it all on my home computer. They kept asking if I was crazy and if the FBI was already monitoring my house. Despite all the jokes, each of them wanted to see what I had found. For a few weeks after that, my friends would come over after school, usually when my parents were at work. We would try random URLs from the copy and paste list. The list itself was hosted on one of those old text-sharing websites, so anyone could change the document at any time. Sometimes we'd see someone delete a URL or write a new one at the bottom. We even had our own list of websites we had visited and sites that were dead. I can't even begin to tell you all the crazy things we saw. We started with the weird urine site, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. Hell, that's the kind of site you can now find on the normal internet. Urine in bags, farts in jars, typical OnlyFans stuff. It's almost like the depravity of the dark web has slowly bled into the regular internet in recent years. Anyway, we moved on to cooler URLs. One week we explored another marketplace that behaved more like a forum. It wasn't about goods being moved, but a service. The members of this forum claimed to be hitmen from a variety of backgrounds, all with different skills and types of targets they were comfortable killing. The latter varied greatly and was reflected in the price. An average hitman willing to kill average people would charge around $20,000, whether in American or Mexican currency. The higher prices were around $100,000, $50,000 up front, and another $50,000 after the assassination was carried out. These were typically for high-profile targets. The seller accepted only American or Russian currency. It was definitely shocking to see, but there was no way to verify any of it. Part of us was convinced it was all just people pretending to be what they said they were. We were curious, so we created an account on the Hitmen forum. It didn't require much, as you can imagine. Less is more on a Hitmen forum. It seemed to be just a way to make contacts, and then the real details and money would probably be exchanged in person. We browsed the website but didn't find anything we considered proof that what we were seeing was real. As we were snooping around the website, a small blue bubble appeared in the top right corner of my screen. It looked like an eye but was only the size of a pinky nail. At first, I didn't pay it any mind. I honestly thought it was something from the browser, like it needed an update or something, and I kept exploring. It wasn't until we wrapped up for the day and everyone went home that I noticed it again. Even after closing the programs we used to browse the dark web, that little blue bubble remained in the top right corner, now set against the background of my monitor. I did everything I could to get the bubble off my computer, but to no avail. Restarts, long shutdowns, antivirus scans, software purges, everything. It was part of my computer. I guess I just had to deal with it, which turned out not to be a problem. Being young and dumb, forgetting about the bubble was like second nature to me. And believe it or not, we kept exploring the dark web even with that little eye watching us. A few more weeks passed before we found a website that really caught all of our attention. It was a black market for hackers and data pirates. There were resumes for hackers there. Lists of things they could do for you, and even some things they could teach you. It was like a hub for creating keyloggers and accessing backdoors. For some reason, being on this site didn't scare us, even though it seemed like the place where bad things would really happen. We hung around that site until one day, the little blue bubble disappeared from the corner. We all looked at each other and laughed, letting the scare wash over us, and then kept exploring. The page turned gray and a text box appeared on the screen. We all started screaming and cheering as if we had leveled up in a video game, despite having no idea what we had just found. The message read something like, "Hello, I am one of the administrators of this website. We log everyone who passes through here as best we can, but I have been monitoring your activity since your first appearance on our site. I've seen you on our servers every day, and I have come to the conclusion that you have no interest in buying or using any of the services listed. I suspect that even if you were interested, you would have no way to pay for it because you are a group of high school kids who have bitten off more than you can chew. The guy went on to explain that we weren't in any kind of trouble, and that the admin team didn't mind us looking around, but others did, due to the sensitive nature of the website. Many real hackers lurk just below the surface, and since I was using my home computer with my family's internet without any virus protection, my connection to the dark web was like a neon sign with all my personal information on it. I had no idea that my presence on each website was a flag for people to come and take advantage of me. He then said that if I took more precautions to protect my connection, I would be safe and protected in my exploration. He continued asking if I had noticed a small blue bubble on my monitor screen. I typed that yes, it had been there for a week or two. The admin explained that I had picked up a hitchhiker on one of those dark sites, and that person was tracking everything I did. They couldn't see me through the screen or anything, but they could see everything I did on my home internet, probably in an attempt to blackmail us. The admin explained that when he checked my connection, he took the liberty of removing my hitchhiker. "You should get out now if you know what's good for you," was the last message I received from him. We all looked at each other with the same feeling of disbelief. Being high school kids, we needed more than just a creepy message. One of my friends leaned over my shoulder and typed, "How do we know this is legit? Anyone could be making this up." The admin proceeded to respond with my full name and address, the full names of several friends in the room, and the school we all attended. We frantically closed the browser, and I can say I have never returned to the dark web since. I can't be very specific here due to the nature of my work, but I'll try to tell the story as best I can. I work in the cybercrime division of a law enforcement agency, and that's as specific as I can get. I want to make one thing clear. Most of the stories you read about the dark web are total fabrications. Tales of red rooms and stories of hiring hitmen are almost entirely false. Most crimes occur on the normal, everyday web. However, one Tuesday afternoon, I received a call saying there was a new case for me. Well, the officer on the other end of the call didn't seem too sure it was a case for me, but he wanted me to take a look anyway. I went down to talk to two young guys, both teenagers, probably still in high school. I was wondering what this was all about when one of them started rambling about something they had gotten on the dark web. Apparently, the two were doing a TikTok or YouTube challenge. I don't remember which, but they were looking for things to buy on the dark web. Again, honestly, there's very little genuinely shady activity on the dark web unless you're trying to buy drugs, so the two were mostly disappointed until they found a site selling books, one of which they bought. Then they handed me the book in question. I put on a pair of gloves and flipped through it. It was full of photos of a young girl. Initially, they were pictures of her smiling in places like a meadow or a city square, but as the book went on, the photos became more provocative, to put it mildly. She began wearing outfits like a maid's uniform or catgirl cosplay, and the last photos were of her with no clothes on. "Is this all you wanted to show me?" I asked, wondering what the fuss was about. That's when they handed me a card that came with the book. It read, "Thank you for your purchase, dear customer." Inside this book, you will find a treasure trove of photos of a young girl, though that's not the most special part of this book. To ensure it is truly unique, we made sure you could enjoy the full experience. The book is bound with her skin, so feel free to gently caress the leather while you think of her. Again, thank you for your purchase. At this point, I should probably mention for those who don't know what anthropodermic bibliophagy is. It's the name of the practice of binding books with human skin. It probably goes without saying, but it's illegal. Even assuming the skin came from a corpse, you'd be facing laws related to human remains. This card, however, by what was written on it, made it sound like the skin had been taken from the girl while she was alive. Well, either that or she was killed and then skinned specifically to make this book. I thought it was all an elaborate joke. My first thought was that the two boys were in on it, but they seemed too scared for it to be a prank on their part. I interviewed them separately, and their stories matched. Okay, maybe they were telling the truth, but that didn't mean the book was actually bound with human skin. Even if it looked like leather, it was most likely animal leather, and all this was just added as part of the flavor of the story. I told the officer in charge of the case exactly that, and said there was no real need to investigate further. although I did give the boys a warning about buying things on suspicious websites. And that's how the case ended. Or at least that's what I thought. It turns out the officer in charge of the case decided just in case to have the book examined, and it turned out that the leather binding of the book was, in fact, human skin. As you can imagine, interest in the case skyrocketed after that. Now we were dealing with a potential murder case, and we called the two boys back in. I was also brought back into the case to try to get to the bottom of things, and I was able to get the URL of the site they used. Unfortunately, the only thing I got when I used that link was an error message. I did more research, but I got nowhere. Frustrated, I turned to other sources for help, but there was little progress I could make. A deeper analysis of the skin revealed that it belonged to a woman of Caucasian descent, which matched what I saw in the photographs. But there wasn't much more that forensic science could do, as the leather preparation process made many tests unviable. A DNA test of the skin revealed nothing, and we searched everywhere to see if anyone recognized the girl in the photos. No results to date. The case was about to go cold when I found an unexpected lead on a forum. I heard about someone else who had bought a similar book and was confused about the truth of what was claimed about it. She was in another state, but we managed to locate the author of the post, who was a woman who had bought it out of sheer morbid curiosity. Forensic tests revealed that the binding was also made of human skin. She had a different URL, one I tried, and this one worked. The site itself was nothing impressive. It was as basic as possible, like old websites from the early 2000s. I would have thought it was a cheap joke based on that alone, but the two cases made me hold back my skepticism. I took screenshots of the website and confirmed with the two boys who first brought us this case that this was the site we were looking for. Both books had been shipped from fake mailbox addresses in major cities, so there wasn't much to investigate in that regard. Given this, we decided to test the site ourselves, and I placed an order, only for nothing to arrive. If anything, what happened was that the site's URL stopped working. And here's where things took a sinister turn. One of the boys, the one who had ordered the book, disappeared one day. He was on his way home from school, and then, well, there was no trace of him. A thorough search for months found nothing, until one day the other boy came to us saying someone had delivered a piece of paper to his house. It wasn't just a normal piece of paper, it was parchment. Later tests revealed that the skin was human, and DNA tests showed it belonged to the boy who had disappeared. On it, written with what was later confirmed to be blood, were the words, "Stay out of our business." I don't like to admit it, but that one incident scared me more than anything I've ever encountered before. I'm not really used to being in the line of fire. Yeah, I know. I'm part of law enforcement, but my job is usually done behind a computer screen. I didn't sleep a wink for 3 nights after we confirmed what it was. I vividly remember how his mother broke down in tears when we gave her the news. There are no more leads beyond that. Anyway, I honestly want nothing more to do with this case. People who would happily skin someone and then use that skin aren't people I want to be in close contact with. Well, maybe the case is closed, but I leave this here as a general warning. Don't buy things from the dark web, even if it's more likely than not to be a joke, because sometimes they might not be joking. What happened to me isn't going to make anyone feel moved, I'm sure. I'll admit it right now. I'm a bad guy. A loser who made his money outside the law. I'm here so others can point at me and say, at least I'm not like him. That's been my role in society, and I've come to accept it. But I'm still a human being. I still have feelings and rights. So what happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. Period. As I said, I'm an outlaw. I sell pharmaceuticals that allow people to forget their problems for a while. The problem is that the government has been taking over my work lately, with the legalization of marijuana and all that. Customers are moving toward easier to get alternatives that don't involve jail time. It's been a tough season for me financially. I had to diversify my portfolio, so to speak, and turn to arms trafficking on the dark web. Now there's a source of income that won't dry up soon. Unmarked guns and automatic weapons with no waiting periods or background checks that attract a very diverse clientele. I don't know where they go or who buys them or for what purpose. I'm not the morality police, just a guy trying to make money. Enough of that, let's get to the point. I have a story to tell and you've got time to hear it. It all started a few weeks ago. Business has been booming lately with all the unrest. Both sides want to be armed. My usual base of gangs, the mob, and various criminals, not to mention all the quarantine. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I had so much business that I couldn't keep track of anything, really. So when a news report popped up a few days ago about a kid, caught in the crossfire of some thugs, and that the police had traced the guns used back to being sold on the dark web. It didn't even register on my radar. That was until a few days ago. I had just hung up the phone with my grandmother, who wasn't doing well, but I promised her that the payment for her treatment was on the way when I received an email from a client, a small gang called Sun Hyun. If that doesn't ring a bell, look it up on Google. They were asking why they received 112 30-centimeter black dildos instead of the AK-47s they had ordered. Let me tell you, they didn't find it funny. After that, the emails started pouring in, and threats against my life became present from major gangs to small local criminals, wondering where their Bambi Killer 3000 was. I spent all Monday contacting my suppliers and asking what had happened. None of them knew anything. According to them, the shipments had been made as ordered. I had to hire a hacker to get into UPS's system, only to discover that the orders had been rerouted to law enforcement agencies, and other orders had been sent in their place. Holy hell, my life is ruined, I told myself with my head in my hands, as I tried to piece together what had really happened. Reality had yet to sink in when a voice came from my computer speakers. Having a bad day? Seems like the whole week, huh? Funny how these things happen out of nowhere and catch you by surprise. I looked up and noticed the light was on, indicating my webcam was also active. When you've been on the dark web as long as I have, you know the risks of being hacked. I thought I had set up enough protection, but there's always someone who can bypass it, I guess. Unfazed by this, given my recent mood, I sat there and flipped off the camera. I wouldn't have pegged you for the stoic type, especially after your reputation is in ruins and your life might be in danger. You've pissed off some major buyers, haven't you? Maybe they'll come for you to take what they didn't get. Wait, it was you, wasn't it? I said, jumping up. Initially, this was a nuisance, but now this voice had my attention. What I may or may not have done should be the least of your worries. You should be worried about the 4 Triad members coming around the corner of your street right now, the voice said. My computer screen switched to a CCTV camera view of my street. I think it was from an ATM and showed a group of burly Chinese men walking down the street. I could tell it was near my place by the little bakery across the road from the camera. At first I rushed to grab my things and leave, but then I realized, why would this voice ruin my life and then help me escape by warning me someone was after me? Inches from the door, I stopped as I pondered this. Moments later, there was a knock on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw the same 4 men who, minutes before, had been on the street. Vibrations sounded in my pocket, and I reached in to pull out my phone. Don't talk, just listen. I know a safe place you can go. Go out the back window and down the fire escape. I'll tell you where to go after that. The same voice from my computer speakers told me through my phone. I didn't have a second to think about what was happening and followed what it told me to do. I went down the rusty ladder and into the dirty alley. I had barely hit the ground when one of the lookouts on the street saw me. He shouted to his companions and the chase began. Take the next left, then cross the street and go down the alley on the other side, he told me. Gunshots rang out behind me and a bullet whizzed past my head. Hurry, you're almost there. I can't hold the traffic light much longer, the voice said. There was no traffic on the street, so I was able to cross easily. The men were about 10 feet behind me, and as soon as I was on the other side, the light turned green, and the road I had just crossed filled with traffic. One of the men seemed to think he could follow me and that the cars would stop for him. He was wrong and got hit by one. This caused a major traffic jam, and the other men were forced to abandon the chase to attend to their now unconscious partner. Keep going through the alley, then take a left and enter the building there. I did as he said. And once I turned the corner, I ran toward the door to my left and closed it with relief. The room was large and dark except for the flicker of a computer screen in the middle. There wasn't much I could make out, but the space seemed empty. From the white light, I could see that the wall to my right was covered in foam latex insulation. My phone hung up and the soft click of a lock was heard from the door behind me. Hey, you can't lock me in here, I shouted. What the hell do you think you're doing? I asked as I approached the computer. How the hell did the Triad get my address? And who the hell are you? Why would you save me after ruining my life? I'm the guy who gave the Triad your address. That's who I am, the voice said from the computer. I saved you after ruining your life because revenge is a dish best served cold. The temperature in the room immediately began to drop, and within minutes my breath was visible as I curled up on the floor in a weak attempt to stay warm. That's when I realized I was in some kind of warehouse and that the foam latex was insulation. My breathing became labored, My eyes wouldn't focus. I tried to speak, but all that came out was gibberish. My heavy eyelids refused to open as I sank into a darkness I had never experienced before. "Get up, I'm not done with you yet," the voice said. My head throbbed like a bass drum, muffled and aching. The lights were now on in the warehouse. The place was even bigger than I had originally thought. It wasn't just a freezer as I had imagined. It occupied about half a city block and was covered in white from wall to wall. There was a door opposite the one I entered and one on each of the other walls as well. A sharp pain spread through my right hand. When I looked down, I was shocked to realize that my middle finger had been cut off at the root. "What the hell? My finger! You took my finger!" It hurts when something is suddenly taken from you, doesn't it? Here are my rules, listen well. Don't touch the computer or you will die. Do what I say, or you will die. Don't try to escape, or you will die. That's it, pretty simple. For the next 24 hours you belong to me. Now come here, I want to show you something. Still too weak to stand, I crawled to the screen like an animal. The pain blinded me every time my hand touched the floor, though at least the bleeding had stopped. Photos of guns appeared on the screen, 3 pistols and an automatic rifle. "Do they look familiar?" the man asked. "No, should they?" "You sold them earlier this year. They were used in a shooting that killed 2 drug dealers and an innocent child. Look, I just facilitate sales. I don't handle the product directly. I'm more of a middleman. What these people want them for isn't my business, I'm just trying to make some money. Then get a job and contribute to society like a normal person, you piece of human garbage. Jobs today barely cover expenses, much less pay for a grandmother's cancer treatment. Go cry to a shrink. The point is that these guns are now in the police station's evidence storage. I want you to get them back. I can't do that, I'm a mid-level arms dealer. I can't outsmart security or pose as an officer to get in there. I'd need a uniform, a badge, access cards. It's impossible for me. I think now would be a good time to take a detailed look at your mutilated finger." I raised my hand to eye level and looked deeply at the wound. Beneath all the clots and pulp, I could clearly make out a silvery metal. "That container has potassium cyanide. If you don't do what I say, it injects a lethal dose. I have the button right here in my hand." Images of me began flashing on the screen. They were of me at the grocery store, at the gas station, even walking near my apartment. "I can see you anywhere in the city. Deviate from the course and you're dead. There's an earpiece in a basket near the door. Plug it into your phone via Bluetooth and listen to my instructions. If you do what I say, you'll be fine." I went to the door and found everything as he said. I connected the earpiece to my phone and put it in my ear. It was small enough that it probably wouldn't be noticed by others. There was also a police uniform in the basket, which I put on. Then he told me which station to go to, and that there was a car waiting for me outside. The door clicked open. Outside was a fully marked police car, fueled up and ready to go. Whoever this guy was, he had connections I'd never seen before. It was a nerve-wracking 30-minute drive to my destination. My hand hurt like hell the whole time, a constant reminder of the power this person now had over me. "So you need these guns back to keep yourself out of trouble. If that's the case, why didn't you send one of your guys to do it? There was no need to torture and harass me like this. I'm just saying you seem to have connections and incredible hacking skills, no need for all this." "Turn left here," he replied, and I drove the rest of the way in silence except when he gave me directions. I finally arrived at the station. I was a bit worried that my hand would draw attention, so I stuck it in my pocket. The extra pressure from the pants made the capsule move. I worried it might activate accidentally, and I'd drop dead in the middle of a police station surrounded by officers. Wouldn't that be a crazy story for the 6 o'clock news? "The evidence locker is in the basement. Your phone signal will cut out down there. You have 15 minutes to get the guns and get out, or I'll inject the cyanide. I don't want you turning yourself in or anything. Everything you need to retrieve the guns is in your left back pocket, and I've already sent all the necessary paperwork to the computer," the man said. Then he was gone. I made it to the basement without issue, showed my badge, and asked to be let in. Everything was going smoothly. I went to the back and put the 3 guns in evidence bags, then started to leave. "Hey, you've got to sign those. You can't just take them like that," said the clerk at the counter. "Oh yeah, long day. I must have forgotten," I replied. I gave the man my badge number and signed some documents. "I thought this case was already closed. Why do they want to review the evidence again?" asked the clerk. I hesitated a bit, then made something up. "New evidence in the case, the prosecutor wants to review some things. They might reopen it. I said, hoping some of it made sense. "Ah, okay. You must be from the central office. All the paperwork is in order, but I'll need a detective to sign off first." The clerk got up and went to the back. I could see him through a glass pane, talking to a man in a suit. He looked at me, then the other man looked at me, and the clerk pointed at me. I don't know what they were saying, but the detective seemed suspicious. 14 minutes had already passed, and I didn't have time to wait. Without thinking, I grabbed the bags with the guns through the plexiglass divider and ran. I could hear the office doors swinging open as the clerk and the detective followed me. It didn't matter if they caught me. If I didn't get out of there in a minute, I'd die anyway. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could. My heart pounded as I burst through the first-floor doors. My pursuers were right behind, shouting and asking someone to stop me. A burly cop stood in front of me just before the main doors. I lowered my shoulder as if I was going to charge at him, but then sidestepped left, then right. He lunged at me, but I barely dodged him and ran out to the parking lot. Gunshots rang out as I sprinted toward my patrol car and jumped in. The rear window shattered as it was hit by a bullet, but I managed to turn the key and speed out of there. The deafening sounds of sirens filled the air as a line of patrol cars chased me. "Do you have the guns?" the voice said in my earpiece. "Yes, damn idiot, you set me up. I didn't know you'd screw it up. I'll handle it, just make sure you get out of their sight." I managed to take a few sharp turns and lose them for a second. Then I heard my mystery man's voice on the police radio, giving them false directions on which way I was heading, leading them away from me. Then he told me where to leave the car I was in, and that a new vehicle would be waiting there for me along with a change of clothes. Again, I did as he said and got into an old Ford Pinto and changed my clothes. It took me about 20 minutes to get back to the warehouse. The lights were off again, and the computer was the only thing visible. "Put the guns in the back, then come back to the computer," I was told. I went and did as instructed. When I got closer, I noticed on the screen a photo of a small child. "I'm not going to kidnap any kid or deal with one. You can kill me right now if that's what you want," I told him. "No, you won't. You already did. Get on your knees and take a good look at this picture. I'm sure you recognize him. He was all over the news a while back." "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never killed a child in my life," I said as I knelt down to look. "Not directly, but let me tell you about this one. He was 9 years old and had just gotten his new shiny bike, the one he had always wanted. He asked his dad if he could go out for a ride, and his dad said yes. What kind of world is this when a kid can't even ride his own bike? He was just a few blocks from home when gunshots filled the street. There were some dealers on that block, and it was a drive-by shooting. Do you know where those people got their guns?" "Let me guess, from me," I replied. "Do you know what guns they were?" A voice spoke behind me, and the touch of cold steel pressed against the back of my head. "You killed my son when you sold those men these guns, the same ones I made you retrieve for me." Whoever this man was, he was now right behind me, and by the sound of his voice, he was eagerly anticipating my death. "All right, man, if you're going to do it, just do it already. But know that I'm only doing this to help my grandmother. She'd be dead by now if it wasn't for me. She's old and has already lived her life. My son had his whole life ahead of him, and you took it from him. The end doesn't justify the means." A dull thud resonated in my head as he struck me with the butt of the gun. I was on the ground looking up, tears welling up in my eyes from the pain. He pointed the gun at my face and pulled the trigger. I braced myself in anticipation of my final moments. Click. The gun was empty. "Death is too good for you, and it will never bring my son back. You're going to live your life in fear from now on. One day, or maybe never, you will experience the most horrible and painful death you've ever imagined. Inside you is another capsule, different from the previous one that won't be detected by any medical procedure or scan. If I ever feel the need to activate it, you'll have a slow, painful, and unstoppable death. You'll have to wait and see if that day ever comes." He then threw the gun against my face, breaking my nose. I heard his footsteps as he walked away and exited through the door. The temperature began to drop again, and the faint sounds of police sirens echoed in the distance as I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in the hospital being treated for hypothermia. The police linked me to the evidence room robbery, and now I'm serving 20 years in state prison. My hand throbs in pain whenever the weather changes, and I hardly sleep anymore. I always wonder if today will be the last day of my life.